Welcome to Podcasting Essentials, podcasting for beginners. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to kind of set the stage here, and we're going to talk about what it's going to take for you to start podcasting, some of the ideas you might have had about podcasting, and what tools and what things I've experienced over the last 2.5 years of putting up a podcast. Out on the Limb podcast for any of those that are interested. So kind of my lessons that I've learned and some of the tools that I use to edit. And we'll kind of get into that here shortly. But what I want to express to everybody is that it's not as hard as you think. If you think about it and are stymied by, well, how am I going to edit? How am I going to put it out there? Well, you're never going to do it. It's taking that first step and just jumping into it. Now, your podcast can be as simple as an audio recording from your phone, or even just sitting in front of your Zoom camera and recording something, or as complex as ours, where we have multiple people on camera and we have guests that we have in person, also on Zoom, and then recording it, editing it, and doing all that. So it can be as complex or as easy as you want it to be, but don't overthink it. If you have an idea, a concept, and knowledge that you want to share with somebody via podcast, just start recording yourself. Now, it may seem odd to sit in front of a microphone and record yourself and edit it and do all those things, but it's really not. It's not that hard once you get into it. Now, there may be some costs involved, but they can be minimal. It depends on what route you want to go. There are some free tools. I won't cover those because I'm not familiar with them. I'm only going to cover what I know and the tools that I've been using and how I've kind of gotten to where we've gotten our podcast to. So, hopefully you'll enjoy the next bit of information in my tutorial of how I actually go through an editing process of our podcast. All right, first we're going to start talking about setting your stage as far as your podcast. So what is your budget? How big is your budget? How minimal is your budget? I'll say for Out on a Limb podcast, we went into it with an extremely minimal budget. And that's because I already had a lot of the recording equipment for our business, for doing our Zoom client meetings. So you could start that way using your Zoom camera and your Zoom app and not have to pay anything to record your podcast. Same goes for an audio podcast. You can use your cell phone or maybe a voice recorder. That's the minimalistic way to do it. Now, yes, you can get into multi-camera operations and multiple microphones and all kinds of stuff like that, but you can start very minimally with a very low budget. Next, who's your audience? Who are you trying to talk to? Is it someone within your community? Is it someone outside of your community? Is it within the greater spiritual community or even outside of that? So think about, who is your audience? Who are you going to target with this? What's the concept for your podcast? How are you going to lay it out? What topics are you going to cover? How long is your podcast? How short is your podcast? All those types of things. What type of podcast are you going to have? A video podcast or an audio podcast? Video podcast obviously is going to be more complex because you have to have a camera and some means of recording that and then capturing all that and editing it. Audio podcast can be as simple as recording it on your phone, editing it on your phone, and putting up a small bit of graphic and then publishing it to whatever audio streaming services there are. Who will you have as guests if you have any? Think about that ahead of time. Reach out to them. Ask them if they're interested in being part of your podcast. Then, really what we're going to be here talking about is editing your podcast. What types of tools, how easy it is, what the flow is, and then how do you publish it? And that gets into the distribution. How do you distribute your podcast? There are many different platforms: YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, and mainly those are for all, I'll say, video podcasting. But in the audio podcast range, you can definitely put it up on Apple, Spotify, Google. There's a couple others, but I'm more familiar with Rumble and Spotify and YouTube. That's where all of my podcasts go, and they are all video podcasts. And then how do you promote it? All my promotion for Out on the Limb podcast, our podcast that we have, is through just social media, friends and family, just getting the word out. But also, it's who you have on as guests, because they cross-promote your program. All right, so editing your podcast, really the essentials to it all. So we're just going to cover this quite quickly so that I can get into showing you how I've gone through and actually edit our podcast. So editing tools. What type of tools are out there? Well, Camtasia is one of them. That's a paid service. Adobe Premiere, Apple Final Cut, Canva, and there are many more. I'm very familiar with Camtasia. That's the one I've been using for the last 3 years or so. I'm not familiar with any of the others, but some of you might be, and you might be very comfortable with them. But Camtasia is the one I'll use, and that's the one you'll watch me edit a podcast on. Now, what do you need for a video podcast? What types of essentials do you need before you even kind of begin to publish your podcast? One, you're going to need a podcast graphic. It could be very simple, just a title on a PowerPoint screen that you export out and put into your editing software. Or it could be very complex and having a graphic designer do a design for you. And that could be done on Fiverr or many other different online service providers like that. A lead-in and lead-out music. Now, this can be, again, very complex or very simple. I use an interesting website called pixabay.com, and I'll put that in the description of this. But you can download music, you can download graphics, and as long as you're not monetizing, you can use those as much as you wish. So the lead-in and lead-out music, that's always good to have an intro and an exit as you enter into the podcast and exit from the podcast. The same goes with the lead-in and lead-out graphic. Again, you can have somebody design that, or you can design that yourself if you have the capabilities. You'll understand all this more when we get into the actual editing of it. Episode graphic, same thing. Specific graphic just for that episode. Episode number, what the title is, and so forth. And then an episode description, a nice lengthy description of what you're going to be talking about over the length of the podcast, and that goes into the show notes, as what we call show notes when you upload and publish that podcast. Additionally, you have an audio podcast, very similar to the video podcast. You're going to need a podcast graphic, a lead-in, lead-out music, episode graphic, and a description. Kind of straightforward from what we talked about previously. Then we get into publishing platforms as far as where are you going to publish your podcast. Well, YouTube is probably the most familiar one, and that is strictly a video podcasting service. Now, you can get around that if you only are doing audio. As far as an audio podcast, you would, in your software that you use to edit it, if you have the ability to import a graphic, you overlay a graphic over the top of your audio stream for the entirety of your podcast recording, and that turns into a video. Then you can upload it to YouTube. So it would be just a static image over the top of you talking. That's a bit more complex, but it's easy enough understood once you begin the process. Rumble, that's another video streaming platform. Again, these are all familiar to me because this is what we use for Out on the Limb podcast, and it makes it quite easy to disseminate the podcast. Spotify, here's another one. So Spotify does both audio and video, so you can put it up either way. But I do believe, if they haven't changed it, that Spotify actually automatically disseminates it across many of the other streaming platforms, like Apple Music, Amazon Music, and different platforms like that. I will have to look into that, but I'm pretty sure that nothing has changed, but they do it automatically. And then there are other platforms that I'm not quite familiar with, but some of you might be. So just look into it and do your research, and you'll find the best ones that suit you best. And then finally, the flow of the actual recording and editing and publishing process. It's just as simple as it sounds. You create an idea, think about it, get all of your notes together, then you record it, then you edit it, and then you publish it. See, just as I said in my intro, that if you overthink it, you're not going to do it. It's quite simple. So just start recording your voice, maybe some friends, however you want to have your podcast, and then understand how you're going to edit it, and then understand how you're going to publish it. It's quite simple. So don't get too hung up on the complexities. Just have fun with it and go out there and record a podcast and get it out there for everyone to hear. All right, so let's get into the editing of your podcast. So as I've previously mentioned, that I use the Camtasia program, and you guys can look that up. If you just Google search Camtasia, it will come up with, I think, a company called TechSmith, and you can look into it from there. But this is the program I've been using extensively for the last several years to edit all my podcasts and different videos that I put up on YouTube. So what do we need to edit? Well, you're going to need your pre-recorded video. And again, we're only talking about a video podcast at this point. And over here in my folder, I have already the preloaded video that's already been recorded. This is from a previous podcast, but this is the raw video of it from an interview we did with Stephanie Berg, who does breathwork. And so I'm going to walk you through the process of doing that. So I've already opened my Camtasia program, and what I have created, and I may have mentioned it earlier, are templates. I have templates for different layouts. So this is our podcast template. So I built out a template for Allison when she does her recordings of herself talking about energy and different things like that she's going to be putting up on her YouTube channel or even on TikTok. And then I have a number of different ones. You can also see TikTok format. I've got a couple special templates that I use. That's the old podcast template that I've made. Outtakes for our annual outtake video that we do for our podcast, and different other templates. So let's go back to the main template that I've created, which is our Out on a Limb podcast template, and open that up. All right. So before we even get into the editing of that raw video, let's take a look at the Camtasia program itself and all of its different features. Though I don't use all of them, I only use a select few features, but I'll kind of give you the rundown. So down at the bottom here, and I'll kind of zoom into that so you can kind of see it. This is the elements that have been created for my template. I've created all these elements, and we'll show you that here in a minute. But these are what comprise the intro and the exit of my my podcast. And this is the track line. So they layer upon each other, and you can build out layers to have overlays of different things. So I'll get into that here in a minute. There is a media file or media folder where all of your media, or like audio and video, goes into, or even images. Favorites, these are different selected elements here on the toolbar that I've captured into my favorites. These are the ones that I use most often. Fading between images or fading between video clips, that comes into play very handily. And fade out and fade in, this is for audio clipping of your audio, fading into the audio and fading out of your audio. And I manually use the audio compression at the end to make sure that all of the audio is at the same amplitude before I render the video. And I'll explain that as we go. The emphasize, I don't use that, but every so often, so I'm not really going to discuss it here because it doesn't come into play with the podcast. But there are different visual effects that can be utilized, coloring and tinting and different things like that. There are transitions. That's what the fade is a transition. There are many different transitions that can be utilized. They're all preloaded in here. You can use animations, which this here, you can use a pan or a zoom into a particular area or zoom out of it, or you can put these different elements over the top of your video, and it'll create a cinematic type of feel to it. There's different behaviors. These are for any sort of annotations that you might put on your screen, how they fly in or fly out. Cursor effects, voice narration, where you can actually record your voice over the top of a set of images, and then audio effects, different aspects of that, noise removal, audio compression, and so forth. And I did mention annotation. So you can put words over the top of your video at any point. But let's get into the actual rendering of the podcast. So I'm going to take this video file that I've already pre-recorded, the raw footage, and I'm just going to drop it in this folder here, and you'll see it starting to load. Move that over. I'm going to fill the screen up a little bit here, so I've got a little bit more visual of my screen. And as that's loading, I'm actually, this slot here, track 2, that's where my video actually ends up. That's where I load that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that in here, and I'm going to bring that all the way down to the start, even though that's not where it's going to go. What I have to do is, because we do a little bit of banter before the actual podcast begins, we just chit-chat back and forth with our guest, or even amongst ourselves as far as, there's typically 3 of us. In this case, it was just myself and my wife, Allison. But that little bit of banter back and forth, we need to crop out of there. So I believe it's somewhere right about in here. Yep. Now I'm going to put my cursor there. And what I'm going to do is do a split. All this does, this is a keystroke that's on the keyboard. It's a simple keystroke. And what this does is it cuts that video at that moment, and I'm going to delete it out of there. Just a simple delete off the keyboard, and I'm actually going to cut it because my window isn't all the way open here. I'm going to cut it out of there. I'm going to bring my cursor all the way back to about right here, and I'm going to paste it in. All right, so what we're going to do now is just to make sure that this is right where it needs to be. And
hey everyone, and welcome to Out on a Limb podcast.
Yep, that's it. That's where I want it to be. And honestly, I'm going to clip that a little bit closer to where Allison starts to talk. Right about there. Split it. Delete that section as well. Now, what we're going to do is I am going to I need to see more of my elements here. All right, so I'm going to actually add, at this moment, I'm going to add a fade in. Fade into that, and I'm going to bring this into right about there. Yep, and now I'm actually going to fill my screen with this because that's going to be the full rendered version of it. All right, so that's where we sit now, and now what I want to do is I want to bring my cursor all the way to the beginning. Okay, so now that I've got the cursor here at the beginning, I'm going to go ahead and just review my lead-in. All of this is my lead-in to my podcast, and I want to ensure that as soon as Allison is saying hello, welcome to Out on a Limb, it falls into place in the right area. So let's take a listen to that.
Welcome to the Out on a Limb podcast. We are all interconnected to a greater web of consciousness. Our aim is to open your mind to a new world through having open-minded discussions about what we perceive our reality to be.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Out on a Limb podcast with your hosts, Will.
All right, that looks actually really good. So it blends a little bit of the logo and the audio of the background music and Allison introducing Out on the Limb podcast. So that's perfect. That's exactly where I want it to be. So now that's in place. Now I'm going to move down here, and I'm going to go almost to the end because I've got to grab my lead out audio and my logo and music and the video that's incorporated with that. So I'm going to select those, and I'm actually going to cut those out of there for temporarily. I'm going to go to the end. I'm going to put my cursor there. I'm going to paste those in. So now they're kind of grouped together, but that's okay. For right now, what I would need to figure out is where I want to cut the end of this. So I think I'm going to cut it right about here, but I'm going to watch that little last segment here.
Those things, and we will see you next time.
See y'all. Yep. So this is right about here is where I want to end that. Again, I'm going to split it. I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to drop in another fade so it fades out. Take these two. I'm going to move those up so they're right in line with that fade. I'm going to move this one over so it's right in line with that. Now, you might notice that I don't have anything after the logo, and there's quite a bit of audio here of the soundtrack or the lead out music and that little tree video in the background. This extra space here, I intentionally leave in for my YouTube videos so that at the end of the video, what comes into place is the ability for whoever's watching it to subscribe and watch another video. There's two icons that'll pop up, and those are linked within the YouTube software when you're rendering a video to them, that they can move on to the next video and subscribe to the channel. So I leave that in there purposefully. For any other platform that I upload to, say Spotify or Rumble, it really doesn't come into play. It's just a lead out. So it's primarily just for YouTube. So let's take a look at the whole ending process here.
Things, and we will see you next time.
See y'all. All right, I'm going to end it there. But yes, that looks good. That looks perfect where all of it synchronizes appropriately. Now I've got one more step that I'm going to do. I'm going to go back here to the beginning and remember that when I talked about audio compression. So what I'm going to do is, if you look at the audio, this little gray or light gray color here of the peaks and valleys, that's the actual audio track that's of the video. So you can actually see where Allison's talking here, and then it kind of quiets down even more so here. This, in this little region right here, this is where Stephanie starts to talk. So her audio is slightly lower or quieter than our audio. So that's not going to sound really good when you're listening to it, via your headphones or even just on your phone or whatever. So what I want to do is I want to put the audio compression over that and just drop it in. And you'll notice that all of a sudden it all equalizes to the same height or the same amplitude. But now in that, I know at that level, just from experience, that's not quite where I want it to be. So I come up here to the gain and I actually up the gain to 150, and what that does, it brings it closer to that median line that's here. That's the gain line, and so it gets it really close to that margin there. So this sounds really good across all levels. And how, now a little more of a technical aspect of that is, when I'm listening to my podcast on my computer as I'm rendering it, I ensure that my computer audio for my speakers on the adjustment, I'll say volume adjustment for your computer, is at 50. I want it at that median or that middle ground, not too high and not too low, but at 50. So that way, that's kind of the entry level for all the audio. So when you start listening to it, when you've rendered it, it's right where it should be. It's not going to be too loud and it's not going to be too soft. So because you could have your volume at, say, a 20 on your computer, which means then you've got to artificially increase it to really hear it, which then that's your final product and it's not going to sound good. So if you keep your computer volume at 50 while you're listening to the rendering of it, then everything else should be just fine. All right, so that is the editing process of it. So I've used a couple different tools. Now let's take a look at just these elements, and I'm kind of going to describe them as they're overlaid of one another. So you'll see where the trees are moving. That's this bottom track here. That's a video that I've downloaded off of a particular website called Pixabay. And that is I'll say a free use. As long as you're not monetizing your videos, you can utilize those videos as much as you want, or images from that website. The next, the audio track, that too, that's the name of it actually, which is listed there. Let's go back to media. You can see it. The audio track is called Lifelike, and that is just a segment of it. And what takes place is you download it, you put it in here and you can crop it and cut it. But again, free use for non-monetized videos. On top of that, a good friend of ours created a voiceover to introduce the podcast. And then on top of that is her logo that she created for us as well. So just this black box, the Out on a Limb logo here, and the podcast, all of that she created to use for our podcast. So now all of it's layered. And one additional piece is this American Writing Award that we won for our podcast in 2025. So all of it is rendered together to create this intro. So that's how it's all layered together. Now, you don't have to be as fancy as this. You don't need to have a voiceover, but these are things we've done, I'll say, year 2 of our podcast. So it's how you wish to go about creating your podcast. All right. So really, there's one final step that's involved, and that is exporting it. All exporting is making it ready so that it can be uploaded. Now, as I click up here in the upper right-hand corner on export, you'll see a couple of different options. Yes, it can be exported out to YouTube, to your YouTube channel directly. I don't use that option because I've run into a few snags with that. But also, once it's uploaded to YouTube, you'd have to render another version if you're going to load it to a different platform. So I create a local file. Which means it just gets exported out as a movie file. So I'm going to create this. I'm going to call it podcast test, and the folder that it's going into. This is right where I want it to go. And then all of these pre-selected options are already going to be here for you. The MP4 is your video file. There's nothing else you have to change. So then at that point, it's a matter of exporting. And exporting is going to take, for a video this size, this is a 1 hour long podcast. So a 1 hour long podcast will usually take about 15 minutes to render, give or take. But that's the average that it has been for our podcast. So once I export it, it's in my folder. I can then take that video file, go to YouTube, go to Rumble, go to Spotify, and upload that video to them. Put a description in there, all the different links to different websites, and now you have uploaded that podcast to social media. And then you can share whatever link they provide to you to that location to share across other social media platforms. All right, so at this point, I am done with the rendering, and I'm not going to export at this point, but I will be next. What I'll be talking about is just some of the, follow-up as far as what we've already covered, and just some thoughts along the way that I don't want to crowd you with here in the editing process. All right, now that we've kind of covered the basics, the essentials, and gone over the editing process, now it's kind of the final thoughts. So, to give you a little bit of idea of where our podcast began and where it's at, a little over 2 years ago, a good friend of ours, myself and Allison, decided that we're going to do a podcast and, create it just because we wanted to have conversations as if we were just sitting around over a cup of coffee and let people in on it. So that was kind of our concept. We didn't really have an idea who we were going to interview at that time, but we had some ideas. But it was just a matter of doing what felt good and what felt natural, just natural conversations, not hyped, not glamorous, just honest conversations, honest and sometimes embarrassing because, we're very transparent on the podcast. We will put our emotions on our sleeve. We'll really talk about ourselves. And I think that's one key thing to a podcast, whether it's audio or video, is being honest and being open, letting people kind of see behind the scenes, being raw, I think some people would like to say. So that's one aspect of it. Speaking from the heart, that's always the way to go. Don't try to, change your context just for the audience. Be who you are naturally, and that's what comes across. If you try to change who you are, it's really going to come across as inauthentic, and people will pick up on that. One interesting thing that we kind of learn along the way is when interviewing somebody. These are all going to be little key points to kind of have at hand. But when interviewing somebody, they're the guest, and let them talk, let them speak. It's really their story that wants to get out, and their message that wants to get out. But do your research. So have time beforehand to look at their websites or look at their books or read their books and do a little bit of research, have some questions. So that way, when there is a moment of silence that, okay, well, they're done talking, naturally done talking, you can ask another question or series of questions, or even have a little notepad with you where you can take notes as you're interviewing them, as they're speaking, so that there may be something that piques your interest. You can follow on with that. So it's how you naturally build that conversation. The consistency, I think that is one of the, I'll say one of the final points I'll put in here, and then I'll wrap it up. But consistency. I'm military background. We call it battle rhythm. It's what happens on the same day, same time, all the time. So our podcast, we put out every single Wednesday, regardless, there was no holidays. There was always a podcast going out every single Wednesday. And that was done for 2 years. We've taken a bit of hiatus now, just because of some logistical challenges that we're going through here. But we've let our audience know that we're on hiatus, and probably this fall we'll pick it up again and start recording podcasts. But it's that consistency that your viewers want to listen to or see in what's going on. And they know that on whatever particular day, whatever particular time, it will come out. So be consistent. Now, podcasting isn't for everyone. I will say that, sitting behind a microphone and just bantering on, as I'm doing right now, isn't natural. For some of you, it might be. Some of you are very, capable of sitting behind a microphone and talking. But there's something about having a conversation with good friends that makes it a lot easier. And when you're authentic, and when you're speaking from the heart, and when you enjoy what you're doing, it does come across naturally, and the audience can tell. So I hope all of this, the kind of the setting the stage and expressing to you kind of where you need to begin and what you need to think about to the point of the editing. And even now, I hope this all resonates with you, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And, if you've got questions, my points of contact are on my profile. You can reach out to me. Simplest is contacting me at my email, which is will@william-brown.com. So just if you've got questions and about maybe an upcoming podcast that you want to do, and you don't know where to start, send me an email and I can maybe help you out. Thank you.